From athletes to authors, innovators to icons, we connect with those who help shape the South's culture, revealing the stories of their lives, their journeys, their triumphs and tragedies, what molded them into who they are today. Broadcasting across the Southeast, telling the South stories. This is where their stories live. Authentically off-script and personally illuminating. This is Audibles with Jason Scarborough. This week on Audibles, Dr. Kevin Chandler.
So right here in the Jackson area, that's where we started writing your story, September 23rd, 1970. So how would you describe growing up here in the Jackson area?
Well, born in Jackson. I guess I grew up in Madison, old Madison. So 1979, went out there. So out in the woods, small school, good parenting, played all the sports growing up, all that. So it was good. It was a good childhood. Didn't go without, that's for sure.
How'd you describe your family growing up?
Had a sister, older sister, 4 years older, and mom and dad. Both of them were mom from Greenwood, dad from Vicksburg, so they were local. Both went to Ole Miss. So I grew up an Ole Miss fan, traveling to Oxford before there were, lights in the stadium. Basically, pulled our trunks up in the Grove and had in time. So they were good. Dad worked, owned his own business. And mom kind of stayed at home most of the time and ran kids around, and very supportive. Couldn't have asked for better parents. You could complain all you want, but can't really ask for better parents than I had growing up. Fully supportive, structured. Grades came first, sports came second, that kind of stuff. Never pushed stuff. My dad was pretty straightforward. It's like, good grades do this, bad grades don't. That's that simple. And I was like, well, okay. It's that simple.
So how would you characterize yourself as a child growing up?
Kind of quiet, definitely quiet, kind of introvert, very athletic early on, but wasn't that outgoing, but lots of friends, played all the sports, good student. I didn't ever really struggle with that. It's either in me or parents or whatever, good student. Plenty of friends, never a lot of trouble, typical growing up, teenage stuff, but for the most part, it was nice. And that's probably the biggest thing people would describe me as kind of shy, a little introvert for the most part.
You mentioned sports earlier, and you play a lot of sports. Had a big impact on you. Do you see the impact still today in what you do?
For sure. I definitely give sports credit for a lot of just sort of how you grow up. I start with my parents. They definitely, were the most important factor at what I would do and who I'd become. But, the coaches and the sports definitely helped with the discipline, keeping track of you, learning how to push yourself, learning how to lose, how to win, as you got older, they teach you how to grow up and be a man. So they definitely influenced, I certainly say to this day, education-wise, while school's important, I kind of feel like sports and getting me to where I am was as big of a factor because it's important for school and grades, but a lot of what you end up doing really requires just hard work, grit, and stamina, honestly. And I've talked to you too. I said, I had Coach DeWeese as a basketball coach and Coach Carlisle as a football coach. Those are two legends. This is a sports kind of legend show, which I wondered why you asked me to be on it because I play sports, but I'm not a legend. But those two were definitely big part of that, the growing up, the discipline, pushing yourself further than you thought you could from the time you're like 7th grade to 12th grade. So it's definitely a big part of that. Teaches you how to fail, teaches you how to fall and have to get back up and keep going and those kind of things. So those are all positive impacts, for sure.
I don't want to assume, but hearing how sports had such a big emphasis on your life, a heavy impact you just talked about. Was there something not involving medicine, being a surgeon, growing up to be a doctor that you were interested in growing up? You said, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to be when I grow up.
Yeah, when you're growing up, you realize, you want to be, Archie Manning at that age, or you want to play sports, and you get to an age to realize, looking at everything realistically, that's never going to be your goal. Looking at, I'm the kind of, when it came time to pick college, and I'm kind of the one that was sitting down. I didn't really have necessarily a reason to go into medicine. I was kind of like, what do you want to do? Well, you're picking through the book, you're a lawyer, engineer, I liked math, science, doctor, and kind of had a dad who owned his own business, but he's always kind of, don't do this, be that. And I was like, okay, I won't do that. And just sort of settled on medicine. But I would say something in either engineering would have been probably a next step.
So is that the inspiration that led you to want to become a surgeon? It was kind of a ruling other things out and because you had the love for science?
Yeah, science, medicine. I guess just a little experience. In sports, you may have a little orthopedic experience. Of course, we've all been the doctors growing up. So that was sort of like you see inside being a physician and doctor. Then you kind of choose whether you're going to do surgery or not. Well, I did actually work in cardiothoracic surgery even before med school, just like a little orderly summer type thing before. And that's where I sort of first experienced surgery. And that did start these guys operate in the operating room, the responsibility, the respect, and that certainly had an influence, and it definitely kind of helped. Then you kind of get into med school, and you got to kind of choose what you are. My personality was certainly, I like fixing things. There's a problem, surgeons fix them, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. I like the hands-on. And so those are things that sort of drew me to surgery and the procedural part of it. And so there was that start of just surgery, like something surgical. I really didn't know for sure what that was going to be at the time. And so, but I knew surgery. And back then, general surgery, which is what my specialty would be, you kind of start there and then you may branch off to other things. So I thought I could start there and I can branch off. But then about a few years into that, and at this point I was married and I had a child. So I was like, can't be in school forever, can't work, train forever. But I just had a day where it's like, man, I'd done some cool surgeries and it was about my third year. And I was like, I think this is what I want to do. I don't want to subspecialize. A lot of people thought I might do heart surgery because of my past experience. And I was like, I don't really want to do that every day. I don't want to, I like big surgeries. Yours was kind of a big surgery we did, if I can say that. But I also enjoyed, outpatient stuff. So I kind of liked the variety and doing both big surgeries and small surgeries. So there was just somewhere along the road, you're in pre-med and you're finally like, kind of get off your butt and do it or don't. Because there was certainly a time that I'm like, I don't know if I want this or not. Like, maybe business is better. I'm studying too hard and working too hard. I'm like, maybe this isn't what I want for sure. But then sometimes things in life happen, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, this is where I see my future. This is where. One thing I learned, and this is through years, is whether it's going into surgery or not, going to medicine or not, at some point you're going to question if you want to go through it. Is it worth going through it? But as I've gone through it, I realize even if it's a few extra years, even if it's going to be hard, if you think the next 30 years, what are you going to want to doing? It's always worth it. Because I would have hated to have done something I didn't want to do, get to out and finish with it and realize, well, it could have been done with that other thing I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So when someone asks me about specializing or surgery students, I always say, look, whatever it is, don't let what looks. So going into surgery residency, I thought, there's a light in the tunnel. Is it a train or is it the end? And when you're first getting in there, it feels like it's a train coming at you. And it's kind of overwhelming and daunting. And so there's a moment you're like, do I really want to do this? It's just 5 years, 6 years. But then I'm like, well, 30 years from now, what are you going to want to do? So it just sort of fell into place. It wasn't an aha moment. There wasn't like my dad was a doctor or anything. Nothing happened major in my life that said, I want to be a doctor.
Sounds like you just kind of made your mind up to buckle
Finally
down.
Make your mind up and buckle down.
Yeah.
I was a good enough student where I was doing it. I mean, my conscience was like fear of failure. I just always had, so my grades were kind of up enough. And when I finally was like, all right, I'm in, I was, some people get behind and it's hard to catch up for the grades and stuff. So.
You referenced earlier playing for these, the names, Dr. Glenn Boyce, Chancellor at Ole Miss, renowned legendary coach Richard DeWeese.
He's going to the Hall of Fame.
Exactly.
This fall. Yeah.
I mean,
Coach Carlisle was in the Hall of Fame.
Hey, Coach Carlisle, I mean, you can't follow
So
sports.
you mentioned Glenn Boyce, and I told you that he was my 7th grade basketball coach.
Yep.
That was before he left MRA. And he was my 7th grade history teacher, and it was one of the best classes I probably took. It was he kept us on our toes. There's things I probably shouldn't say because it's a long time ago, and you maybe not can do that stuff nowadays. But he definitely kept us on our toes. But he was a great initial influence. He actually convinced me to play from up on the 8th and 9th grade basketball team because he was the coach. 7th grade was a separate thing at that time, and I was like 5'2", little, and some of these 9th graders were pretty big. So I really was like, I thinking, I don't know. Well, instead of picking me up from school that day, my mom just went ahead and left me there, and she had probably talked to him, and so I went on to practice, and it ended up being the best thing I could have done as far as leap years. And he was a great coach, and so I'm not surprised he's where he is now. He remember him teaching us the difference in intensity and tense. He was very symptomatic. So that was the first experience of someone that's kind of sports legend. And of course, Coach Wisu, when he got to MRA, I was like in 6th grade. He was PE coach, girls basketball, boys basketball, track coach, and so you see where he is now. But back then he took scrubs like us, who was a small school, and he made us better. So if we were playing teams like JA and prep, it wasn't because we were that talented, because he, between discipline and hard work, kind of think Hoosiers, pass it 10 times before you even think about shooting. And then, of course, Coach Carlisle was one of the most, legendary, of course, very, very disciplined, very tough. Always, you didn't ever want to play a Jack Carlisle football team after a loss, Both end to east. I remember thinking sometimes during the season, you always have that point and you drag down a little bit, and your team doesn't halfway through. Like in different moments in those years, 2-a-days in the middle of the season, coming up in the morning to practice in the afternoon, just because he's like, and I remember Coach Carlisle one time, we walked in on a Sunday, and we had lost, didn't play good, and we usually just come in and watch film, whatever. We're suiting up, and he said, there are no starters right now. He said, today we go out and decide who wants to play. To say the least, whoever we play the next week, we won.
Today's conversation is brought to you in part by Farm Families of Mississippi, reminding us that every meal starts on a farm.
Mississippi farmers raise over 800,000 head of cattle each year. We take care of our livestock so you get what's good for your family on your table. We are only one of thousands, but we are united as one to grow the food, fiber, and shelter you need every day. Mississippi needs farmers. The Farm Families of Mississippi.
Hey, it's me, Gus the Gopher for Atmos Energy. I dig all around the yard. Occasionally, I bump into a utility line and get a headache. But if you hit one with your shovel, backhoe, or ditch digger, you could cause a gas leak, disrupt service, or worse. So call 811 at least 3 business days before you or someone else digs in your yard to have those underground utility-owned lines marked. It's free and it's the law. You dig what I'm saying? For more on safe digging, visit atmosenergy.com/811.
Audibles continues with support from Farm Families of Mississippi, where agriculture meets everyday life.
I mean, 3 really influential men in your life, and then you take those lessons. You finish MRA in '89, off to Ole Miss from '89 to '92. You finish cum laude with a major in biology and minor in chemistry. So how would you describe your time at Oxford?
Well, it start off as usual. You're a freshman. You're trying to figure it out, have a good time. Pre-med's tough as a freshman. And again, luckily I was able to stay above ground. It was a fraternity, so that was a good time. But I didn't get too caught up in it. I had a good time. I had friends that were, let's just say, business majors, and they had more fun than I did. But I still enjoyed my time. I think I did a good job at enjoying my time, but being disciplined enough to go study. That's one that's like, okay, I'm going to go here and study. I'll be back for that party later when we can do that. And then later through college, I got married. So it was kind of, that changed my whole sort of perspective at that point. Got more serious. I actually enjoyed school for a little while there, like hey, this is actually kind of interesting, not just trying to get a grade or get through it or not. So
enjoy the college experience.
Mhm.
Then it's off to med school from 93 to 97.
Went straight into med school, yeah.
Everybody has a different description of their time in medical school. How would you describe your time in med school?
You know, the thing about life, it seemed like each time along the way, something prepares you for the next. So pre-med was bad in the sense of, yeah, you're studying a lot compared. Of course, med school was worse. And it was obviously a lot of studying. And I tell people, you know, the easiest semester in like med school would be like your very worst semester in college as far as how hard it was. So the first 2 years you're just studying a lot and you're just studying. That's it. I mean, you kind of live through that. If you have hobbies, you can do some other things. You're not just, you know, completely married to med school, but it definitely consumes you. And it's nice having everybody in the same. The difference in med school and in college was everybody's in the same boat.
Mm-hmm.
We're all there together to suffer. But it's hard. Then you do 2 years of sort of clinical studies where you do your different rotations, where you're going to decide if you want to be surgery, medicine, or whatnot. And that's kind of hard. It's more fun because you're working, you're on the floors, you're learning, it's stressful. But residency was obviously 10 times harder in the sense of work hours than med school. And you know, if you just go back and think, I'm on call 3 nights a week in the hospital in a high-level tertiary care center. But so med school sort of prepared you for the next step to a point. Yeah. So when I got through residency, I work hard, but it's kind of like it's a vacation compared to what I was doing. I remember one of my partners about a year into it said, man, you hadn't taken a vacation yet. And I looked around, I was like, this kind of is a vacation compared to the residency we're doing. So they all kind of prepared each other on top of the other. You know, you just kind of keep your head down and keep going.
You mentioned the experience earlier. You had a couple of summers where you spent at Cardiovascular Surgical
Mhm.
Group here in Jackson, and you referenced earlier those experiences kind of lit that fire even more to
Yeah.
be a surgeon. How would you describe your stints there?
Well, they kind of did this for pre-med students. They kind of they pay us a little bit just so you could say you're working, and then they let you go into surgery. They would even help us assist and stuff during surgery once we got to a point. So Dr. Henry Tyler, who is a legend of heart surgery in this city, Dr. Mundinger, who's retired, and Dr. Ron Kennedy, who's about retiring still at St. D, were the three main surgeons there. We did also go to Baptist some, but you know, it got me in the operating room for the first time. That was like, you know, and then it got me at the table and not to send a shout out to, he just died, Tommy Clowder. He was a physician's assistant who probably helped teach me how to sew 30 years ago. He had just retired and he recently passed away. So it gave me that jump start. So when you're doing residence, when you're doing rotations, when I went to surgery rotation, I was more comfortable. I'd already been in here. Some people are like, that's their first experience to walk in as a student. They're like, you know, what do I do? And surgery experience in a teaching hospital is not always quite the same. So if I'd gone straight into university, teaching hospital, surgery rotation, I may not have had the same experience because I already knew what it was like on this side of it. Mm-hmm. So that kind of helped. But I think it was just the sort of the work they were doing, the hands-on. It was pressure, but I kind of enjoyed some of that. Like I said, maybe I didn't want all that every day like heart surgeons. But that definitely made it an easier transition from, you know, into surgery.
So it's after med school, you finished in 97.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're off to North Carolina for your general.
Charlotte, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Carolina's Medical Center was the hospital where you do your residency. And it was a tertiary, when I say tertiary, kind of like university, high-level care, takes care of everything that comes in and a lot of trauma. And so that was where I did my training.
When you reflect on the time spent there, I mean, it was instrumental in your career. How do you reflect on that time now?
It's where you're developing. It's obviously crucial. It was an interesting time because that was a time when open surgery was becoming more minimally invasive. And I just sort of got fortunate that I was in a place where they were really progressing quickly. And so I was able to get into laparoscopic surgery pretty quickly. Whereas some places you're having to learn it after you finish school or residency. And so that was good. That was a good program. Worked you hard. That's the bottom line. It's sort of like med school. You're all there suffering together. It's a little club of residents, and we're all just sort of getting butts kicked together. You don't have any other options. It's not like I'm missing out on what's going on down the street with my friends because we're all there together. So the first year, you're just surviving. You don't know what you're doing much, but you figure it out fast. About that second year, the hours and all that become less overwhelming because you want to be there. You realize you need to learn this stuff, and you don't want to miss cases. You want to be there for all of it. So it's no longer, when am I getting out of here? It's like, I'm staying for the surgery. So it's a tough lifestyle, and I wasn't married, so it's a tough lifestyle for people around you. I'm sure you definitely have to have people who understand your absence, because you have no, I mean, that's one thing now in my life, I do have some control. Call when I do this, when I do surgery, but then, I mean, you're under somebody else. Yeah, you can sneak out when you can or when you're off, but it's hard to, you don't walk in and say, I want to take tomorrow off. You know, you don't do that. You know, you try to give it. So that was a tough time, kind of good memories. Still the guys I know from there. There's a few that it's like a little fraternity, and it's almost like a team. You just always kind of have respect for each other, no matter how different we are, because we've been through it. We've got a respect for each other. Like, and I have that same respect for anybody else who's done what I've done. Like, even if they didn't train where I did, I'm like, instantly I just have a respect because we both know what we've kind of gone through.
Support for Audibles comes from Atmos Energy, helping to fuel homes across the South with safe, reliable, natural gas. We'll be right back.
When it comes to choosing energy for your family and your home, make the smart choice with natural gas from Atmos Energy. It's efficient and reliable energy that's essential for today and generations to come. You can count on affordable natural gas to help you save money and keep you comfortable while fueling your dream home. So make the smart choice and talk to a builder today about including natural gas. Together, we're fueling our energy future. Atmos Energy, your natural gas company.
From our view on this farm, food security is national security. Our nation must have a sustainable food source. Keeping the supply chain moving and food on our grocery store shelves by growing the cleanest food in the world.
We're only one of thousands, but we are united as one to grow the food, fiber, and shelter you need every day because Mississippi needs us. Mississippi needs farmers, the farm families of Mississippi.
Family owned and operated since 1986, Lakeside Molding has become the trusted source of architectural products throughout the South. They offer fine interior architectural moldings, custom millwork, and cabinet doors designed and handcrafted in Flowwood. Their showroom on Lakeland Drive is stocked with today's most sought-after interior details, including corbels, post, fireplace mantles, bath vanities, mirrors, and much more. Tim Shoemaker and his staff work closely to meet client needs for new construction, restoration, and remodeling projects. Lakeside Molding, where details make the difference.
When it comes to concrete work in central Mississippi, trust a name built on generations of craftsmanship. Nico Concrete Contractor. Nico is a third-generation concrete professional with over 30 years of hands-on experience and more than 20 years in business right here in Brandon. From residential driveways and patios to commercial parking lots, metal building foundations and retaining walls. If you want it done right the first time, call Nico Concrete Contractor. Built on experience, built to last. Welcome back to Audibles, presented in part by Atmos Energy, natural gas, the smart energy choice for your home.
So you began your employment at Lakeland Surgical Clinic,
Correct.
July 1st, 2001. So the title General Thoracic Surgeon, that's a big title. So for our viewers, what all does that entail? What kind of procedures and surgeries?
Well, and nowadays at thoracic, I probably wouldn't even include that in there. So when you're doing your residency, as we talked about, you're learning a lot of different specialties of surgery. Of course, there's general incorporates. I mean, the old days, general would be maybe the general surgeon in small town doing hysterectomies and GOM. But now it's more GI surgery, as you know. So anything from esophagus down could include that. Intestinal, gallbladder, hernias, colon surgery, those things. There's open surgery, which is kind of maybe the old-fashioned way, but we still need to do that sometimes. And then there's minimally invasive, which is laparoscopically, and now it's even more robotics. But then there's these things that we do, like skin, soft tissue that people come in with, we'll take care of. We do colon cancer, breast cancer. But when you're training, we do a lot of trauma. Luckily at St. Dominic's, I don't have to do a lot of trauma. But if I was in a smaller town, like let's just say on the coast, or I was in, say, somewhere like Vicksburg, I might get stuck doing a fair amount of trauma even as a general surgeon, just because we do that training in our residency. We do pediatric surgery. I don't do much of that now, but yeah, the occasional younger kids I'll see, and we may fix a hernia or take out an appendix. Transplant surgery, we do rotations on transplant. I don't do transplant, obviously, but it's a good learning experience. You learn how to take care of those patients. So vascular surgery, I did a lot of vascular surgery in my training. I do none at this point and don't want to do any, because as we get more specialized and more, there's now endovascular open, so there's more stuff to learn. And so I'm fine with focusing now on mostly minimally invasive surgery. Laparoscopically, as I said, we've transitioned into robotics, which is kind of like laparoscopic on steroids. And I tell the patients, you may not have known the difference, but I kind of know the difference. It makes life a little easier on me. So that's kind of where we are. So the thoracics, there are times in some general surgeons in the old days would have taken out, they've done lung surgery, they would have done a lot of things in the chest. And even right after getting out and training, I did some of that kind of stuff. But at this point, we may have to put a little chest tube in for some reason every once in a while, but it's pretty rare. So mostly gastrointestinal surgeons and other things.
What are the surgeries? And I'm going back to a conversation you and I had at lunch a few years ago. And it was just a conversation. I was a little surprised. The surgeries that the public might think are, those have to be the most difficult surgeries.
Yeah.
Sometimes maybe they're not.
Right.
What are the surgeries that are recognized by you and your colleagues as being the most intricate and difficult?
Difficult. Yeah. There's, of course, one that's always a little harder is someone who's had redo surgery because of scar tissue. I'd say just right there, that makes it a little more challenging. But, we get into bigger surgeries. People think of pancreatic cancer surgery. It's called the Whipple procedure, where you remove part of the pancreas, and that's a tedious, difficult surgery. Any kind of esophageal surgery, a liver resection, a surgery like what you described, you had diverticulitis. That's a tough surgery sometimes because it's pretty inflamed, and there's things you can do to cause harm if you're not careful. So those can be a little more difficult. Sometimes simply the position something's in can be difficult. Something deep in the pelvis can be harder to reach. What you're doing may not be that hard, but just the act of getting to it because of something lower down in the pelvic area. So it ranges, but those are some of the few, the things I do every day, like gallbladders, hernias, and those things are pretty quick and can go pretty quick if in the right settings, but they also can be difficult. It's like not every organ is made the same, and not every disease of that organ is made the same. So one gallbladder can be easy and one can be very difficult because it's gotten so bad, just like you and I talked about colon surgery. I mean, there's mild diverticulitis and there's bad diverticulitis perforation. And when it gets inflamed and socked in, it can be kind of tough.
I'm going to tell that story in a minute. I want our viewers to know I've got a personal testimony with Dr. Chandler and want to tell that here in a moment. How do you handle situations like emergency situations that come up right in the middle of surgery? How do you handle that?
Well, I think that's part of the training. That kind of goes back to being the way I was raised. We talked about my parents and the coaches, and discipline and focus and intensity versus tense. And, the positions I played, it required more head stuff where no matter what's going on around you, you still had to stay focused. So in sports, it does allude to that. And then probably in residency and training, you're really learning how to focus on what you're doing. Just laser in, because no matter what's going on around you, the world can be colliding But if you're on the table, then my focus is on you. And yeah, if something happens during surgery, your heart rate, the idea is to you not see me sweat kind of thing. It may be internally, maybe something's going on with me, but my brain and all that's got to stay steady. And you just have to laser focus and think through, okay, what's the next step? We've got some bleeding. How do we, which is what you learn, because the first thing you'll see as a young student or resident, when something like that happens, you put a finger on it and stop, and you look at them and say, what are you going to do? And so that's part of learning. That's why training takes 5 and 6 years, and you do thousands of cases, starting with the easiest ones until you're at the end where you do the hard ones, and you've had somebody there along telling you how to do it. So the first thing, some people say, check your own pulse, right? Like, okay, check your pulse. We have a problem. And then you just have to start thinking through all your years of training. What's the next step? And you've usually done enough that when I finished training, and I wouldn't say this now because I don't do much trauma, but when I finished training, if you came in, I don't care what you came in, shot up, car wreck, I'd done so many traumas that it was almost like I could go through the algorithm of getting you from point A to point B pretty good. So it's kind of the way it is with surgery. So when a problem arises, you got to stop, be calm, don't do anything harmful, don't do anything stupid to start with. Just, first of all, just stop and grab your senses and then focus on what you're doing. And then your training takes over, just like people describe military, stuff like that. And luckily in training, I was able to go through the combat. In the military, your first experience may be combat. And I was able to sort of do that with someone initially holding my hand to where I'm then holding somebody else's hand doing it. So
I've never seen you anything but cool as the other side of the pillow, man.
Well, and that's been you say growing up, that was kind of my personality, I guess. I think as I've gotten older, I maybe feel internally, maybe I've kept too much coolness inside. But yeah, even as a resident, some of the people would mention that, and I think that's what maybe gravitated me towards surgery, is just handling those type of situations, not sort of losing my control, so to speak. That's a gift, but but at this point, most everybody should have some of that if you're a surgeon.
From the seed, and the soil grows row after row. We take care of this land, using just the right amount of our natural resources and never more than we need.
We are only one of thousands, but we are united as one to grow the food, fiber, and shelter you need every day. Because Mississippi needs us. Mississippi needs farmers, the farm families of Mississippi.
Is cooking your passion? Do you love to bake? Do you want to be a chef? You need to check out Culinary Arts at Holmes CC. When the affordable tuition you need meets the technical skills you want, that's when you know you're a Bulldog. A Holmes Community College Bulldog. Enroll today at holmescc.edu.
Mentioned mentoring others at this point. I want to go back to your inaugural surgery at Lakeland Surgical Clinic. So that first surgery, can you reflect back on that? Was it a mix of nerves, excitement? I mean, how did you gear up for it?
It is a difference. We've been trained, and usually by the time you leave training, you should be ready to do this on your own. But you still had someone there if you need them. Like there is a rope if you need it. Now, I have partners, so there's always been a rope there too. But, we're busy and we try not to interrupt each other. So I can remember the first thing I did. One of my older partners was about to go out of town. He had been left a patient by one of my newer partners who was currently out of town. I probably didn't even know how to get to surgery yet. I'm just sort of walking around new, trying to see where it's running. And I see him, and he says, "Hey, I got this case I was going to do." And it was like an amputation, which we do some of those of someone's foot. We don't do many of those, but every once in a while, nobody else can do it, so we'll do it. So he's like, "Hey, you want to do it?" And I'm like, "Sure." So that was my first case, and some of the techs who've still there, even moved to different hospitals, will still remember that day.
Wow.
So it's a little nerving getting through the first case or so. Is one, they don't really know how you do it. You're trying to learn, we call them our cards, where like, where's the stuff you use for the surgery, the sutures, the instruments and stuff. So there's some of that going on. But yeah, luckily you're kind of used to it at that point. But there is something to be said about that first time on your own. And it takes some years before you've done enough of the cases, not that you hadn't done enough already, before you kind of can, because when you're new, you're like, well, I can't screw this up, right? Because you hadn't done enough cases, because then everybody will think you don't know what you're doing. So it's a little bit of like, hope everybody does good. And then after like now, you've done enough cases where, if a complication arises, you've got hundreds and thousands under your belt, you don't feel too, things are going to happen. There's not if anybody says zero risk or complications under their hand, then they hadn't done enough surgery.
You've referenced how we know each other a couple of times since we sat down. So it was back in 2020 for our viewers. I had gotten really, really sick with diverticulitis, and it runs in my family, unfortunately. And the case had gotten so bad, the situation gotten so bad, that they said that there's nothing else you can do. You have to have this cut out. You have to.
Yeah.
You got to go have surgery. First time I met you, you said, call me with any questions. I did.
Yeah. I'm interrupt you real quick, because one thing you did do is you did your research and you did ask your questions, so you were prepared. That was good.
Yeah, this kind of training comes in handy for what I do. And I could not have progressed doing what we do now if I had not had that surgery. And the thing I remember, you were always the same. You were always so calm, collected, and kind, which honestly in medicine today is kind of a lost art, a lost trait, if you will.
Yeah.
So I just, to our viewers, I want to say publicly, thank you. I was saying before the shoot, I feel like you saved my life, because it could have turned into a really bad situation had I said, "No, I'm fine.
Right.
I'll be okay." Because so many people do that when they're recommended to have surgery. They will try to continue and say, "I'm good, I'm fine," and they won't have the surgery. So I'm thankful that I did. And that's how you and I
can be resistant to surgery. I understand that.
Yes.
Yeah. So, there are sometimes, in medicine, and maybe it's because we're all so busy and people are, you don't have as much time. And so it is getting harder to spend time that you need with patients. Like there's not like a 30-minute window or an hour and stuff like that, and it's easy as you do these things. And I've used the term, if you can get a little institutionalized in what you're doing, meaning it's just what you do every day, and you kind of forget that you're sitting across from me, a patient, and I tell patients, they say, "I'm scared." I'm like, well, if I was having surgery, I'd be scared.
Yeah.
And I'm doing your surgery. So I understand that being scared is part of it. And
you said that to me.
Yeah. And it's my job to sort of be that calming. I can't be making you nervous, right? I have to be trying to let you know that I know what I'm doing and we're going to take care of you. Even if I know that there's some potential pitfalls and risk. So I always try to remember that, remember in what position you're in as the patient. That you're vulnerable. You're going to be asleep. You're under our control. So I always try to make sure I remember that, so it reminds me of that I'm not getting used to this, so to speak. Sometimes in ER type stuff, trauma, the clientele you have, it gets easy to sort of like be a little hardened. And so that's important. Same thing with family members waiting. I try to understand that, keep them updated, because they're in there just wringing their hands. And even it may be a minor surgery for me, but for them, it's their loved one who's going under surgery. And I try to understand that it's their most vulnerable moment. So that's very important.
My father was with me that day. He was the one, because we were still under a lot of COVID restrictions back then.
Yeah, that's right.
And he bragged on how you kept him up to date on everything. So shout out to Dad, right? And he was just talking about how you just kept him up to date on everything. And so thank you. I want to say that publicly to you and your staff. Your PA described it as a masterpiece. She said that was something else. She'd been in a lot of surgeries with you. So for folks on the fence about whether they should have it done or not, or whatever you're facing, get it done. How do you address, you mentioned wanting to keep people updated in the waiting room, calling my dad that day, keeping him updated. You try to put yourself in their shoes, like you just said.
Yeah.
How do you address those really tough topics with a family or a patient, like end of life care?
Yeah, that's very hard. And some of the hardest conversations, the hardest we have are someone that it is unexpected. Let's say if somebody comes to you and they already have a diagnosis, you're sympathetic, empathetic, and you're sorry, and you talk to them and you try to give them all the time they need. Yeah, maybe there's a crowd of patients waiting on you, but you just got to say, you know what? I'm going to take the time I need. So the hardest one is when you walk in, you found something during surgery that wasn't expected, or you do the biopsy and you're giving them information. Ideally they've brought somebody with them, because one thing, they're not going to hear anything you say after you deliver something that's got a potentially poor prognosis or life changing. So that's one. Two, you kind of have them sitting down and you're direct. When you let them know what's going on, you don't try to mince words so they're not sure what's going on. You try to be direct, but you try to maintain eye contact. If you put a hand on them, a shoulder, and sometimes when somebody walk over, put my hand on their shoulder while they're sitting there, little things you just show, this matters, I care. Try to reassure, maybe we don't know everything yet. Maybe, hey, we can treat this. We're going to beat this, things like that. That's the first thing. The next thing I do is I just kind of offer them to come back or call again, because I know they're going to have questions, especially if there wasn't someone there with them to hear what was being said. So almost offer another, first of all, I say, do you need a minute? Do you need a moment? Do you want me to come back? And they may say yes or no. Or I'll say, look, would you prefer us call family or get someone here? And some people know I'm fine, and some people yes. And so you kind of do that, and you just try to be, basically as reassuring. And honestly, I'll just kind of offer them like a little something to help them relax that night and sleep, because I know it's going to be hard. So I'm not greedy with that kind of medicines at that point. I'm like, look, if you need a little something to calm your nerves, that's fine too. But it is trying to remain, and that's gotten a little easier as I've gotten older, maybe because I'm older and I feel like I have a little more seniority, authority figure. I don't know what it is. A little harder if you're a young guy trying to talk to some older people. And honestly, just to say this, some of my best growing experiences and learning, especially when it comes to faith-based stuff, has been how patients handle bad information, and how I've been so impressed and really gotten as much from them as they would get from me with how they've handled bad situation. I mean, the people that, still have strong faith, they're like, things are going to be fine regardless. And so I really sometimes get more out of the patient's response than any way I'm going to be able to help them for that case. There's certainly several over my career I can think of specifically, even picture those patients that like, wow, he kind of taught me a lesson in faith, So
how do you manage that stress, not taking your own mental health, your own physical health, and you have a stressful job, probably most stressful of anybody in the world. How do you manage your mental health and physical health once you go home?
Ooh, good question. One thing I learned I've always exercised. Growing up doing sports was just part of it. So I could tell so I did notice during residency when I'd lost time and that I needed, some of it was just like, well, you're not working out and you're just feeling tired and so exercising became sort of that stress reliever, and it was more the fashion of running. So that was a big factor in it. Of course, when you go home and if you have family, that helps. It is hard to, and I'm certainly going to be guilty in the past of trying to let work go when you go home, because it's not a job. Just like you're going to leave here and you may have in your brain, you're wondering what could have gone different or whatnot. So you can relate to those things where you're in my profession, you're never off work, technically. I mean, someone's covering my call at night, but that patient's on my brain, and I'm trying to. But so I try to, just like we've learned to do in surgery, kind of compartmentalize things. You have to kind of learn to do that, but you do need outlets. And I've learned over the years, I do tell as I've gotten older, I think that little underlying stressors cause more problems than you realize. Even the little days, like, yeah, it's a little outpatient surgery day for me. These are quick, easy cases, but I even realize I'm still operating on someone. I'm still responsible for cutting them. So it's a little stressful that even I don't realize, because it's not a big surgery. It's not like your surgery stressed me, all right? Your surgery would stress me. But even smaller surgeries, I didn't think of them as stressful until later in life. I'm like, maybe this is why I'm feeling this stuff, kind of stuff. So but I'd say, I think exercise, eating well, obviously, I try not to ever go to other things to help you. Medicine, alcohol, avoid all those things, because obviously those are never going to actually help deal with it.
Today's conversation is brought to you in part by Farm Families of Mississippi, reminding us that every meal starts on a farm.
Mississippi farmers raise over 800,000 head of cattle each year. We take care of our livestock so you get what's good for your family on your table. We are only one of thousands, but we are united as one to grow the food, fiber, and shelter you need every day. Mississippi needs farmers. The Farm Families of Mississippi.
Hey, it's me, Gus the Gopher for Atmos Energy. I dig all around the yard. Occasionally, I bump into a utility line and get a headache. But if you hit one with your shovel, backhoe, or ditch digger, you could cause a gas leak, disrupt service, or worse. So call 811 at least 3 business days before you or someone else digs in your yard to have those underground utility-owned lines marked. It's free and it's the law. You dig what I'm saying? For more on safe digging, visit atmosenergy.com/811.
Audibles continues with support from Farm Families of Mississippi, where agriculture meets everyday life.
You mentioned faith earlier. How does faith play a role?
Well,
in
and I'm glad
Chandler's
you brought
life?
that back up, because that's a big one. And there's definitely places over my life where I've had to rely on that for those reasons of, one, I got to give it to God, because when people talk about me, I'm like, we're going to give all the credit to him. I'm just sort of his servant. I have to do everything for the right reasons. I mean, you can do surgery for the wrong reasons. So I always try to do not just surgery, but life through the lens of, am I doing this for the right reasons spiritually? Am I doing your surgery for the right reasons, not just because I need the money or, whatever, or I'd like to operate, I need to do it for the right. So you always have to go through, just like you would any decision you make. Am I making this decision for the better of the patient? If there's anything that's in it that's not really pure for me, then maybe it's not the right thing. So, but also having to just give it to God and let him take care of it. It's in his hands. So I've had enough moments in life where I realize I can't fix everything. Sometimes you're out of control, and you just have to sort of give up and say, God, this is in your hands. And then you just have to listen. But spiritually, daily walk, I've had to learn that over years, keeping in those things, because it kind of helps keep you grounded and help you remember what's really important. Job is important, yes, but at the end of the day, it's not most important, because it does linger on your mind. A patient is not having a great outcome, or you're worried about an outcome, and it can affect your life outside of surgery. So exercise, faith, those definitely play a big role. And I do some sports. I don't do as much golf as I'd like. I've got some partners who play a lot of golf. That's kind of their outlet. Being around other people, it's sort of like being outside. But I used to not think that way. I thought it was like a badge of honor to sort of handle all that, but I also have learned over years it's good to try to neutralize it too.
I'm gonna switch it up on you.
Mhm.
I love that. I probably waited 3 years to ask this question to you. If we go get in your vehicle right now, everybody's got a guilty pleasure music. Do you have a guilty pleasure music? What are we listening to? Podcast, maybe?
Well, as I've gotten older, I do probably more podcast driving around listening.
All right.
Yeah. But it's going to usually be on, it could probably going to be a little more of the 80s, 90s rock. Maybe a little more on the classic rock. But I like all music. The stations are going to be, along those lines.
Give me some band names.
Well,
what's a go-to?
The go-to.
Do you do that before surgery? Is that
it's funny. People do ask about, what music you want to listen to, and I always say whatever everybody else. Sometimes I may ask the patient. They're not going to be hearing it, but
right.
I usually just let whoever's in surgery, because I'm not going to be really paying attention to it, so I'll kind of do that. Put me on the spot to give you names. I always like the little Led Zeppelin, and those are the ones that go way back.
Nice.
To start with, but then some of that 90s, like Queen. I love. There's not 90s, but just those old songs.
Bon Jovi.
I like it. Oh, of course, Bon Jovi.
Come on.
All the 80s.
Poison.
Runaway is the best song. First song.
Oh, come on.
Ever heard? Yeah, I love Poison. I like them a little more now than I think than I did even back in that time. But a little bit of the grunge rock I kind of liked. A little bit of Nirvana. What are the ones? I'm kind of blanking on some names. And I like some of the oldies, get a little Elvis, stuff like that. Good.
See, now you've given me ideas on what playlist I can send you when I come across something.
Yeah.
Right? Say, hey, play this next time you do a surgery, right? See how well that
it
flies.
goes. Yeah. Yeah, that would be my workout list would be mostly kind of an 80s rock.
Yeah.
Maybe some 90s rock in there. Some Van Morrison, though. I love that kind of stuff. And then there's the Beatles and Elton John. All that. I have a pretty broad range.
You got a pretty wide palette there for music.
And even like in the Super Bowl a couple years ago, had the old rap.
Oh yeah.
I kind of realized how much I didn't like it as much then as I kind of liked it now, compared to the newer stuff. It's kind of like the Snoop Dogg, those kind of things. It's like, well, that's pretty. I kind of like the rhythm a little more.
You're
Run
like
DMC.
You're like the third or fourth guest since we've had on Jeremy McLean at Southern Miss. He shocked everyone by saying his guilty pleasure was 90s rap.
Yeah.
And so there's been 2 or 3 guests since then that have said they enjoy 90s rap. So you won a lot of brownie points with a lot of viewers, more than likely. So my final question for you. Years from now, when we look back at this and you're looking back at your career, all the cases, all the patients, people whose lives you've changed and affected for the good, what do you hope your legacy to be?
Well, first of all, a good person.
Mm-hmm.
Not just good as in what people think or see, but just generally good. Obviously a good father. And obviously, hopefully that positively influences those people in a good way, not just did their surgery, but allow them good years. Things like that are very important. And spiritually, because I know that what I've done ultimately years from now won't as much matter because, we'll all have to be somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And so most important is kind of relationship with God spiritually, that's most fulfilling to where this other stuff doesn't define me or make me who I am. Just like a good surgery, you can walk around like you're great, but there's some surgery is a humbling profession. And just when you think you're God, it will knock you down and you'll have a complication or something. It'll let you know that you're not just perfect. And that's one thing you kind of got to learn. But obviously, hopefully help those along the way. And it's a big list. I sometimes have to stop and think because I've always had to keep up with the little stickers. And some years you even have to enter them into your data just for your board certification. And it's like, wow, And I'll still see some of my patients, and it's been some of them 20 years. I've been 22 years in practice, and I'll see somebody that I've been seeing now since then. And it may be a different problem. And I'm like, we're both still here. And that's fun. It's not as quite continuum of care as, say, primary care, but I do get to sometimes, and that's another, I enjoy that a patient actually came back, right? They came back maybe for a different problem, and they liked the result the first time, so they came back. So that always makes you feel good inside. But it's nice to be someone's surgeon, and sometimes we get to do that. Hope I don't have to be yours again, but
no,
if I do.
Hey, look, I'm telling you right now, and I'm saying it publicly, if another surgery is down the road, you're my guy.
Well, if I don't do it, I'll get it to who does. That's the way I tell people. If I don't do it, I'll get it to the person who does do it.
I do want to thank you again, because you have an important chapter in my life, and I know a lot of people are watching in the Jackson area and abroad who you played a major role in their life. So thank you for sitting down with us for this, and maybe we'll do part 2 down the road.
Well, I appreciate you asking me. I know when you first mentioned this like a year ago, I was like, well, sure. I'm not sure. I thought this was a sports show. I'm not sure what I'm going to. And he said, no, we're trying to branch out and we'll do other stuff. So we talked about it, and I thought, well, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. And then you came back around. And I was like, well, I don't know what anybody else is here for me for, but yeah, I'll be glad to come on. So I appreciate you.
Everybody's got a story to tell, and we appreciate you telling yours. So glad to see you.
Yeah, thank you.
There's no answer that's wrong. There's no, only you know what's right. It's your story. Am I slouching? I'm very comfy. Like he was in an MC Hammer video doing the Too Legit to Quit stuff.
Real stories, real legends. The South's own storytelling show. Join us next week for another episode of Audibles with Jason Scarborough.